culture. And I do that through the diversity and inclusion lens. I work with leadership. I work with full staffing. We do full assessments of companies. Not only what does your D&I statement say, but how are you implementing it, and how does it look and feel from the moment you step into your company?
Thank you so much. And so what I want to start with, this is supposed to be like a conversation. And so you guys all are welcome to send your questions as we talk about some issues. And if you have some thoughts, you send them questions to me and I will include them in a discussion as we go forward. And, Leslie and I connected yesterday and we've talked about how the attitude towards diversity and inclusion has changed inside companies even in the past month. And so maybe, Leslie, you can start off by telling us what has happened and how, what has been happening now in light of obviously what's happened with George Floyd and the protests that have been taking place around the country.
Well, let's go back before that. Let's start with, we're all working, everyone's doing what they do, pandemic hits, everyone goes, go home. No one really gives instruction, just go home. So everyone is floundering. So unless you were senior level, a lot of people that were Black and people of color kind of felt lost in the mix sometimes of communication. I think everyone felt lost in the communication, but I think there was another level. So then we get home, we start to settle down a little bit. Some people voiced their opinions on what they felt needed to happen. And then the world took another turn and knocked us all on our feet with not only, and I'm going to be very honest and very graphic, not only by seeing a white man put their knee in the neck of a Black man and then go, wow, something's not right. Racial, we need to look at racial injustice. We need to start marching. But let me be clear. 2 weeks ago, I was getting emails and panic of how so many companies were dismantling their D&I departments. So what's the first to go? Marketing, PR, and now diversity and inclusion. So you went from 2 weeks of getting rid of that department to the next week writing a statement that you stand with Black lives and that you stand with people of color and you stand with this. But yet a week ago you had no money. Now you have money. I'm confused, but we'll get into that later. I remember doing a rapid question, so I'm gonna try to keep it short, I promise.
And by the way, I've heard Leslie speak at the past event, and I think I know how eloquent Leslie can be, so thank you. But what I wanted to say is that I just read, I'm on this newsletter called, it used to be called 21 Hats Morning Report. Now it's just called the Morning Report. And I just did a podcast on this very issue where now all company executives are asking themselves whether they should make a statement about where they stand, with Black Lives Matter, against racism, etc. What is their stance on diversity and inclusion? And so my question to you, since we're talking about startups and small businesses, do startups and small businesses have a responsibility to diversity and inclusion, and how should they handle the current events?
So whether you have a responsibility to diversity and inclusion has nothing to do with what's happened in the last 2 weeks. And so if you're using that, that's an excuse. If you're making a statement to make a statement because you feel like your colleagues are doing it, and I worked with several companies last week that called me in panic about statements, and they wanted to whitewash the statement. And when I say that, they kept saying, well, I want to say people of color. I'm like, but that's not the conversation at this moment. The conversation is Black Lives Matter. Diversity and inclusion is a different conversation. When I say diversity and inclusion, that is gender, race, LGBTQ++, and disabilities. So that's a different conversation than Black Lives Matter. So why are you making this statement? And if you're making a statement, what are you attaching to the statement? What's the actionable goals that you are now going to be responsible for and accountable for? Because if you're putting out a statement to say we're cool, you weren't cool with me 2 weeks ago, and I'm always going to say, I'm putting it in always in my tense now. You weren't cool with me 2 weeks ago because you were trying to get rid of the departments. Now I'm your new best friend because you need to roll with it. So do small businesses need to make a commitment? You need to make a commitment to your business and the foundation for which you plan on growing your business and living true to your business. So don't say it and don't be it if you're not going to do it.
I don't check the box, because checking the box, like you like to say, I never worked. So tell us a little bit. So what is, if we were to think about diversity and inclusion within companies, what does it mean? How is inclusion different from, let's say, belonging? What is diversity? How would we go about thinking about it as a founder of, let's say, you have 5 people and you want to grow?
Well, number one, diversity, we're all diverse. You can have 10 people in the room and all of you are going to think something different or have a view on something. So I hate the word diversity. We're all diverse. When you're bringing someone that doesn't look like you, talk like you, sound like you, walk like you, and hang out at the country club with you or brunch with you on the weekend, then you need to figure out, why are you bringing them in, right? And that's across the board. So if we're speaking diversity and inclusion and not Black Lives Matter, if we're speaking diversity and inclusion, if you are trying to integrate not only new diversity of thought, and if you're smart, that's the first thing you're thinking of. Who's the best person that can bring diversity of thought in with us? And then once they're in, belonging, you belong to a group. You belong to a book club. That doesn't mean you feel that your voice matters within, that who you bring, what your added value is, that's inclusive. The seat at the table could care less about a seat at the table. Is my voice respected and heard? Do I have the power of the purse? Can I write a check? Can I make suggestions? Can I move this forward for the betterment of the entire company? That's the difference.
Right. So let's say I'm a startup founder and I obviously don't have a lot of resources. I can hire a diversity and inclusion department. But I do care about creating an inclusive culture that will be the foundation of the company as we're going to grow, the foundation of the small business that I'm going to scale. What do you suggest in terms of, like, let's say 3 actionable things that even owners of small companies can do to prepare for future hiring, but also to be able to bring strategic partners and collaborators and maybe freelancers on board that will provide diversity of thought, that will provide an outside opinion that, I think will ultimately drive innovation, will ultimately make them more competitive, and will ultimately create a business that is sustainable long term. So it's not an option. I think at this point, it's not something that you do to please your stakeholders or for PR. I think, everybody needs to understand that this is part of the long-term strategy in order to be successful.
It's not an add-on. Diversity and inclusion is not an add-on.
Right.
So that's the first thing you have to know. The second thing is there's this amazing thing called Google. And see, in this new thing that's called Google, you can actually type in Black-owned businesses in my neighborhood, or Black colleges, or organizations, or poets, or bookstores, and you can learn all about what's happening right in your neighborhood. And then you can learn what's happening within your industry. And if there's somebody that you see that is like-minded of your company, that's when you reach out and say, hey, I'm a small business. I see that you're a small business, or maybe not a small business. I would love to figure out how we could partner together, have conversations together. Can we just do events together? What's the smallest hanging fruit that we can do together? Can I put you in my newsletter? What can I do so that you build relationships? So what's happening now doesn't happen, where people are hitting the Google button and going, blackface, D&I, come speak, because that's really what's happening. And so I have spent the last week speaking to companies, actually having to explain my connection to the person that brought me in, so that leadership didn't look like they hit the button and said, Google Black person D&I. What they kind of did, but I was at least attached to their PR firm already, or to their marketing firm, or to their advertising firm. There was some type of connection that was genuine, why I cared about that brand to work on. So start looking at, how do you partner? That doesn't cost anything. Start following people on Twitter or Instagram of businesses and things that you see that also interest you.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And, I think as the Startup Station, I've already begun doing it. And that's why we're having this webinar. We'll continue to do more. I have my other dear friend who is a great coach on personal branding, Liz Nganzi. I don't know if you've met her, if so, no, I'll introduce you. But yeah, that's definitely, I think, something that we can all do. And then Steve asked a question, how can we be actual allies? I think this goes into answering a question like that we can, and Steve is a brilliant journalist that I've gotten to know a few months ago. And so Steve, you can write about people that are making a difference in the community. Steve is from Boston, but also in the startup community, and give them a voice, give them a platform, and
But
make
let's
people
go
aware.
back a second. And I'm sorry to cut you off, because that word ally is a thorn in my side. Stop saying
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, please voice your concern.
You're an ally. You are an advocate. That means when we're not in the room, you already have a conversation about it. That's what Paula was in the very beginning. I saw him as an advocate. That I don't know how he got my name. He told me he saw me years ago speaking, and he remembered, and it was time to write something. He wrote about it. Then he's a champion. I see him constantly doing the work, being part of trying to make a difference. I look at Paulo now as an ally. He's in it every single day. It's not a good day or a bad day. He's walking along with us. That's an ally. And guess what? You don't get to call yourself an ally. We get to call you an ally. You be our advocate or a champion, but you have to be bestowed ally. And that's something that I learned a long time ago working with the LGBT community. I can't just say, or with the Israel, all the other stuff that I do. It's not up for me to say I'm an ally. You have to say, wow, I see what you're doing. Then if you are an advocate or champion, you're already speaking about us when we're not there, making sure that there's a project that's coming. Hey, did you know this is going on? Because we may not know, because we may not be in those rooms. That's the difference.
Right. Yeah, thank you so much. This is very useful. Paola actually sent a really good document, a useful BLM resource. Thank you, Paola. By the way, if you'd like to add something to the conversation, please, please jump in. I've been working with Paola for the past couple of months, and I have a lot of respect for the work that he's doing. I think it's incredibly important. So I'm going to send it to everybody right now, this link.
And I'm just going to say, I don't want to jump in and take away from the wonderful conversations, but I want to thank you, Leslie, and I want to tell you, as a white man working in the DNI space, what you said about allyship is something that means tremendously. It means a lot to me, and I always tell everybody that I know, it's like, you cannot call yourself an ally. You just can't do that. Either you are or you're not. And I really appreciate what you've said, and I strongly encourage people to be very mindful of that kind of language.
No, definitely. You are an ally. And it's important, because a lot of people will like to claim that, but he walks the walk all the time. Like, it's just without knowing it. I opened up my email, and I'm not going to lie, I had a tear in my eye one Sunday morning. He was just like, I'm featuring you in the Forbes. And he goes, I'm going to do it different. I need a picture. And I was just like, wait, what? You're featuring? Thank you. So what that means is it's like inclusion. Someone sees you when you don't even know they're watching you. That's the difference.
And I want to say that, I have worked with everybody on Paula's team. It's a very small company, but, he is a white man, but he's got two women. One of them is CEO, and they're different races. And so he was able, and just the fact that he's like, I don't want to be, I want this very talented woman to run the company and give her the opportunity. I think it talks, to the, it's basically, this is diverse. This is how we should all be, and give people opportunity regardless of, color of skin, gender, sexual orientation, age. By the way, there's a lot of bias towards age as well, etc. And so just, I guess, to go to the next topic. So for a small company, we understand now what we can do to start building relationships with other businesses, find strategic partners, find stakeholders, etc. But now that we're ready to grow, what would be the building blocks of a foundation of a good and thorough diversity and inclusion policy? What should we put in place?
Again, you have to know why you're putting it in place. What does it mean to the company, not only today, and it's going to shift and change, because as we see, the world is shifting and changing very quickly. So the handbooks I did 2 months ago, 3 months ago, now have to be updated. But it is, are you making the commitment for no bullying, no sexual harassment, equal opportunity, equity within? Equity is not always money. It's a stake, as a stakeholder in the company, to look at your C-level, which when you're a small company, your C-level is you and your partner sitting next to each other. So what does that look like as you continue to grow? Where do you want to go? And first off, the diversity and inclusion again goes, if I can't do it now, how do I start bringing those partners in that will help us continue to grow? So when we're ready, we know who we can reach out to. And you have to also take your fishing net of hiring and throw it out there and say, I use these 5 hiring places, and it may not be agencies. It may be I put my post up and it can only stay up 3 days because I only have money to stay 3 days. If you've made those partnerships back before, you can now leverage their social media opportunities to say, hey, this job is open, or we're looking for interns. We want to make sure we're diversified. Can you also put this post up? Before this happened, I was working with the city of New York to help them get their internship program out. And they came to me for that. And actually, when they came to me, I offered because I know how well that internship program is. And then the world turned and it didn't happen.
Right.
But we already had a relationship that I offered. Let me help you make sure you're reaching a diverse audience.
So setting those relationships is really key to make sure that you have access to the best talent, that you have access to the best candidates. It actually goes back to the question that Hamp asked me, which is what action steps should companies do to make sure that the most qualified candidates get seen and interviewed with no bias? And it sounds like setting those partnerships and even getting access to those candidates is the first step. What other things would you suggest maybe for the interview process or some other company policies that could help?
So number one, if anyone ever tells me they're doing something without bias, you already lied. So you're already biased towards that. So let's stop that. We all have bias. It's understanding that you have a bias, but that you're going to be open to candidates that come in that may not have gone to your school, be part of your fraternity, or like I said, do brunch, or maybe not even have a college degree, but has a passion for what you're doing. And you have to remember, everyone's not going to have the love or passion for your company the way that you do because you started it. But that shows that they want to bring something new and work with you and have a breath of fresh air that you can grow. That's what that means. If you're in the interview process, speak about, here's our plan for diversity and inclusion. This is where we're looking to grow our company. Be open about it. You may not see it today, and we understand. Here's some of our partners. This is our goal and our mission. And then you can't expect the one Black, Hispanic, disability, LGBT person to come in and wave the flag for that cause. That's not fair to them. It's still the leadership, the responsibility to continue to make sure that there's an inclusion within to bring in people, whether it's a consultant, to have the conversations and teach the sexual harassment and, you know, and teach what bias really looks like as you continue to grow. You have to make those commitments.
And would that be, you know, first I want to comment on the diversity. You and I spoke yesterday, and there was one company that said that they're diverse because one person went to Stanford and one person went to Harvard. And having gone to also to 2 Ivy League schools, I can tell you.
Make this stuff up, people.
I can tell you that this is not diverse. In fact, you know, I found Columbia, I went to Columbia Business School, and I found the people who they admit to be, even though on the surface, they do come from different countries and they do have a certain percentage of women, they do have a certain percentage of people of different races, they're still somehow the same. I was at a class 15 years later and I saw the same type. And so by no means Columbia Business School is, at least to me as somebody who went through it, is a diverse school, because even though people may look like the same, they hire one type of thinking.
Well, you had to have a certain grade point average to qualify. You had to have the money to pay for the application to qualify. You know, there's a whole list that we can go down. So of course you're still going to be different but the same, but different but not.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So one company I'm working with, actually one of the things that they did, and they're out in Colorado, and I said I would be speaking about them because I love that they decided that they were going to take off the checkbox if you've been to jail. They were going to take that barrier away. They do background checks on all employees regardless, but they were no longer going to have that box on the application. That's one step higher to bring in someone that may be not like you or the same background as you, but doesn't mean that their skills aren't stronger than your skills.
Right.
So
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I think you need to be more open-minded and you need to remove barriers. And in fact, you know, I don't know if you read the hiring policies of Elon Musk, who removed the education requirement. And if you want to get a job in one of his companies, you just have to pass a test. You pass a test, you get a job. You don't pass a test, you don't get a job. And then it's a level playing field. If you spend your time and prepare, then you're eligible. It doesn't matter if you went to Harvard or you didn't go to school at all and you learned everything online because you couldn't afford to go to school.
Well, look, when I first came back to America, so I lived out of this country for 13 and a half years. My first career was a classical ballet dancer. So I lived there. I produced for TV over there. I did theater. I moved to Japan. I owned a theater in Japan. I decided after 13 and a half years, I would come back to America. And I came back with the grandiose notion of, I'm going to produce for television. I come back home and I saw Maya Angelou and Oprah on it, talking together. I was like, oh, there's two Black women on TV in America. Maybe they know what to do with me now. I moved back and I sent my resume out everywhere. And they were like, wow, what a, you know, eclectic resume. That's great. Where's your communications degree? I was like, what communications degree? I've been doing press in Europe. I have this, I have that. And they're like, you need a communications degree. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Well, long story short, I ended up producing for television. But I didn't go through the front door to get there. I went through the back door and the side door, but I got in and I proved myself. In 2 weeks from a PA, a production assistant, to a producer, because they realized I had the talent to do it.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think that's a path, I think, for a lot of people who may not have the right credentials or even connections. I think there are a lot of careers that are completely closed off. Even right now, if you don't go to the right school, you know, if you don't have the right degree, if you don't have the right GPA from that school, et cetera, it like just goes, or, you know, let's say, I think private equity, from my experience, is the most exclusive finance position to get. And then you can only get it through connections, or let's say venture capital. You know, those.
But this is the time that small business really get to stand up.
Yep.
Even we're hurting. You know, if you have a small business, if you have a big business, we're all hurting if we have a business at this moment. But this is the time that you get to stand up, that you get to try something new, that you get to expand your wings and bring in diversity, because you will not grow without having diversity of thought and diversity of people within your team or attached to your team or partnerships. And I know we spoke about this yesterday. You may not need it for your first round of money, but by the time you start getting the second round and you start growing, I know for a fact, and this is your world, not mine, but people are looking at how diverse are you? What's that going to be? Because that's the growth of your company and the growth of your market share. Who are you speaking to? Who can you speak to? That's why there was so much tone deafness out of these statements, because they were trying to speak to a community they've never spoken to before. But they're scared of losing their dollars on that way. That's what happened with everything going awry. Everybody's not going to be Ben and Jerry. Ben and Jerry's is Ben and Jerry's, and they do what they do very well. But you can't come out the gate being Ben and Jerry's unless that's what you're going to build your foundation on and live it.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think, you know, generally speaking, I know that recruiting and hiring, you know, is a huge problem for startups, because a lot of the times people who are founding companies, they don't really know how to do a lot of the things that are involved in running the company. And recruiting is one of them. And so what would be, you know, so we've talked about building partnerships. We've talked about potentially altering your application process to remove questions that may disqualify certain candidates. What other things can a company do, maybe in terms of education of its employees? And like Hemp is asking, how can current employees be encouraged to work their networks to bring in other people that are diverse? If it's in addition to partnerships, what can, I guess, a company do in terms of education and culture to, and then we haven't spoken about the term culture, so we can speak about that a little bit too, but what can they do actionable, like, you know, give us some examples that we can start putting into practice.
So I know some companies do, oh, we'll give you $100, $200 if you bring in someone. If no one's going to bring in anyone if they're not comfortable where they are. So you need to think about that. So to put the pressure on an employee to bring in other employees that look like them, I'm barely having it. You barely listen to me. I'm going to bring in somebody else. For there to be two of us to bitch around in the snack room together? No. So that goes back to your company culture. You have, if you want to bring in people, number one is leadership's responsibility. It's not the employee's responsibility. But I understand if you're trying to grow, you can also put things that, you know, that LinkedIn thing and that Facebook thing and that Twitter and that Instagram, and they're all free. And literally say, please roundtable, please share. I'm looking, you know, we're looking for employees. Here's an open position. Please share it everywhere, anywhere. That's another thing that you can do. But you can't expect your employees that are part of a company culture where they may not feel included or have a voice to go out and share what's going on. See, company culture has to be, is something that you build. It's not something you speak about. It is more than ping pong day and wine and cupcake day. And trust me, I love a nice glass of wine and a good cupcake. But I'm going to need to know that when I step up to do a presentation, or that you bring someone in, that their voices are being heard and not spoken over, or that's cute, but not now. There is, you know, everything's not going to happen right away. We get budgets, but then transparency, no such thing. Visibility is very important on what you as a company want to do and where you want to go. And if you don't share that, and then you have employees that are sitting back like, we don't even know what's going on, and there's 10 of us, that's problematic. You won't grow in a diversity way, or as a company, you're going to hit a wall. So there's a responsibility.
Communication and visibility and transparency are very important. And what in terms of specifically putting in some guidelines for meetings, or maybe running certain workshops that will encourage certain patterns of behavior? Like, have you seen that being effective? Like, what are some of the general themes that you've seen work in the companies and companies can do?
Right. So I've had different things. I've had full assessments where I've come in and no one knew I was there. Well, some of them knew because I was the only Black person, but I was looking, let's call it what it is. But, you know, so I was looking at the smell of the office. If you have a library, do you have library books from Black authors or Hispanic authors in that? If it's a graphic design, are you sharing? So these are small things that you have. What's your pictures on your wall say? What's your motto say? And then from that, you start building, you know, and you have to be willing to be open, just not to stay within your own box of your comfort in order to be able to grow. One of the other things is, yes, I go and I've been doing sexual harassment training. And the reason I was asked to do that is because they were like, the staff knows you now. They know your voice and they respect what you're bringing to them. So when you come back to do that, I am now just got engaged from a company that I was working with to do monthly seminars. Not only do monthly seminars on bias and that type of thing, but to look over their projects to say, you may have missed a spot there. Have you reached out to that? To have a new fresh eye, to go, have you pulled all the plugs in the diversity and inclusion world? How does that, I know you had good intentions, but it didn't, when I read it back, it doesn't sit well with me.
And it's not executed.
Yes. So there's companies that are doing that. Doing one training, I'm going to call out the companies right now. Sorry. And if any of you are there, I'm happy to have this conversation. Starbucks and Sephora. You cannot close a store for 2 hours training and expect everybody a week from now to remember that training or that it resonate with them. You also need to bring in the right people that can speak to your company, that can have that conversation, that understands your mission and your guidance, and understand that the boss could be 26 and the worker could be 65. And how do you bridge that gap of just communication before you're trying to teach something new? And I'm going to say teach something new because teaching bias and understanding bias is new. Teaching race, racism, and racist are 3 different words. Having those conversations may not be the best for someone that's in the company, but to bring someone in and say, help us try to understand it in the context of how we do our business. That's the difference.
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like, there are differences in how you look for candidates and how you do your application process, even when you set up your office, in how you create an environment that is representative of everybody who works there, or if it's not everybody still works there, it's representative of everybody who could work there. And a lot of it comes from leadership and transparency, and then the last step is education. Am I missing something, or would you like to add?
So I'm going to say transparency is hard. And I worked with a great CEO that said, I can't always be transparent. There's things I'm going to know as a CEO or leader that I can't share, but visibility is what I can offer and guarantee to everyone. See, and communication is what I can guarantee to continue to work on for everyone. That's where the difference makes. That's how you get your employees invested in. Again, whether you have one employee or you have one intern that's helping, you still need to have that communication for them to invest in, and then you still have to be accountable for what you say you're going to do as the leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to the interview LinkedIn Live of Sarah Blakely, who I respect, and she built a very successful company. And she said that she told everybody in the company when COVID happened to come up with new designs. And it didn't matter what your role in the company was, whether you were graphic design, whether you were in marketing, whether you were in sales, or your job was to create new products. She said, if you have a new product for Spanx, please, don't be shy and submit it. And I think when leadership shows that kind of inclusiveness and encourages people to speak up about their problems, then that's the kind of communication visibility that can promote diversity of thought, because that's how she can crowdsource innovation from anybody. Ideas can come from any place.
And so with this past week, what I said to some of the companies the ones that I had an opportunity to speak to before the panic of writing a statement, and I said to them, what words do you want to see in the statement? Because see, you have to live this, not me. You have to answer to your partner, to your friends about the company statement. What words are important to you all? And I just took notes. I sat back and listened. And I took notes of certain things that they said. And then I was able to help those that I was working with in the company craft that, so that when the employees heard it, they heard some of the things that they said, because they knew that then they could keep that commitment as well. So, it's a difference from 300 company to a 30-person company. But if you ask, you have to be able to listen.
Absolutely. And so it sounds like that there are some building blocks in terms of what a good company culture, what building blocks a good company culture should have. But the way it's implemented, it's different for every company. So there's no size fit all. Right. And so what is this, when people are thinking about it, what would that depend on? Would that depend on their, they have to do their branding exercise, understand their value system? Where would the differences be in terms of implementation?
What is your value? What is your mission? And where do you even want to see your growth? And then from that, when you're bringing people in, how do they fit into your vision, your mission, and your growth? And then what am I implementing that allows people to have a breath within this vision and mission? Because if you're bringing them in just to stop them, then you just stopped your building blocks. And that's one of the main things. And here's a word that gets thrown around a lot. And for some, I'm now using it in business more than I've ever used it: empathy. Because see, we can speak about building all these blocks and not understanding that even, let's just go to the virus. We are all in this together. We are not equal within this together. We are not equal. And that goes past cultural, whether you're Black or Latino or white or purple or green. You have to understand there's people sitting in the Hamptons that had people deliver lights and sounds and backdrops to them. And there's people sitting in closets thankful that Zoom has backdrops that they can use because they don't want people to know where they are. There are people that are dealing with 4 and 5 kids that do not have nannies, or one child, or a partner, or abuse, or ageism, or am I going to keep this job? So along the way, you have to remember that we're in it together. We're not equal together. And you have to have the empathy to understand that sometimes you may need to step back and just listen and watch and ask, why did you show up 3 times, late in the last month? Is there something going on? I'm not saying you coddle anybody. That's not what business is about. I'm someone that's all about business. But on this business trail, you need to be able to see the people that are working with you on your journey. You need to hear them and see them, or they will not respect what you're trying to offer either.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a captain cannot give the ship without the team, right? So if the team does not support the captain, right, or the team, or if the captain does not listen to what the team says, then the ship is not going to come back safely to harbor. So I think, you're absolutely right. And could you give us, I mean, you've done so much work with different companies. Could you talk about a few examples of, what a bad versus a good diversity and inclusion policy is, and what is the impact that it had on the company in terms of its growth and bottom line, people's happiness, retention rate, et cetera? Like, what effects have you seen?
It goes back again. There's not a good or bad. The good is you wrote it. The bad is you don't do anything with it. Because see, everybody puts on from the EEO office, we will hire, we are equal opportunists, we hire gender, da, 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 da. Everybody has that on there, right? You have to have that on there. So that alone, that's your base. So many companies just have that as a base. They don't do anything about it. So that's bad diversity and inclusion. You just lied. But you legally
can't execute. They may want to, but they may not know how to execute it, or they don't have the right people in place, the right leadership in place who will champion that.
So guess what? That's called communication. Speak up and say we don't have it. I will not allow anyone to give me any excuses on why they can't find anybody or why they can't find anything. Unacceptable. Sorry. No, don't care what size of company you're in. Because if you want to go ice skating on Friday in Nebraska, you will find the ice skating in Hawaii or wherever. Like, there's just zero excuse on why you, now understanding that you may not be the best to implement it. There is a reason why there are D&I consultants and people. And again, you have to find the right one. No, maybe you should not be holding the conversation about race. Maybe you shouldn't be holding the conversation about diversity and inclusion. And you also have to be able to speak up and say, I don't have Pepsi Cola money to bring you in. Here's what I have, but then be focused on what you're looking for. I need to figure out how to have this conversation, or can you look over our human, our resource, before we have someone sign it, does it look right? Does it sound right? I'm talking about what hours you show up, who you report to when you call out. All of those things make a difference within a company, and they make a difference if you have a company that you have an events team and you have a creative team and you have all these different people on different hours doing different things. Where are you understanding what people in your company need to do to execute for the company? So when you're looking at diversity and inclusion, is there, like I said, no bullying policy? Is there a lactation room that is legal now? What are those things? That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for it as a whole. Gender, race, LGBTQ, and disabilities. I'm looking to make sure that you have, if nothing else, the basis. And then if it's time for conversation, bring someone in and then figure out, this can't be the last conversation. How do we keep the conversation going?
Yeah, I mean, I think I absolutely agree. I think holistic approach is the right approach. But I think I'd like to ask you again, so after you work with companies and you have seen those changes being implemented on a holistic basis, what impact have you seen? What has happened with people? Like, what assessments have you done to assess it? And what is your feeling? Like, what has happened?
Right. So I'll say, I think for some, communication has opened up, that they feel that employees have felt like they now have a voice to, whether it's suggesting projects or that they know who to go to when things are good or bad. That in itself is a huge step, I think, in any company when it comes to diversity, inclusion, or company culture. I have seen people be able to now implement exterior partnerships that people were scared of before. but they were allowed to do it. Now working in these boxes, a client came back and said, guess what? We can bring on the amazing person we've wanted to hire from Chicago, but didn't have the money to, you know, transfer them to New York. But now we can hire her because we work in boxes. So they went with the best person they wanted to. Now it gives a new way to work. And that's what I'm starting to see now. I'm also starting to see that people are calling back going, we need more training. That was good. You made us start to think differently. We know that this is not a one-time thing. And then you see not departments growing always, but the conversation of who they even invite into the rooms. Because a lot of times with the D&I departments, it was segregation within inclusion. They had Black folks over there, LGBT over here, Hispanic over here, this over here, but yet there was no one single person bringing the full message back to leadership and C-suite. So I've been able to work to take some of those walls down to make sure that whatever you're implementing, it actually goes back so that you can decide how it continues to grow. Everything's not going to work. Stop trying to be so perfect. Understand that you may put something in place and go, you know what? We need to tweak this, and have the leadership, which means everyone doesn't always like you, to say, let's take a moment, let's rework this, instead of saying, let's take a moment, this doesn't work.
Right. Right. And so the feedback loop, right? The feedback mechanism is extremely important. I actually want to mention Paula again, because he's creating an app that's going to allow companies very easily to collect that feedback and then look at it and identify patterns, in areas of improvement in terms of what's working, what's not. And I think it's pretty revolutionary.
And Paula and I've had this conversation. And then when he gives them all that information, they actually need to execute it. They just can't have a nice, pretty thing sitting on their desk of all the amazing work that Paulo has spent all his time and his staff doing. It can't sit there. Now that's where it comes to the other part, where you need the two parts to come together. And the two parts is what Paulo does, then what I do, and then what leadership has to hold on to the commitment to actually now bring it to life.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So you need a plan, and by the way, I think even for startups, execution is the biggest reason why startups fail. And I think this can be extended to any part of a strategy, which is, so execution will be the main reason why diversity and inclusion will fail as well. By the way, we are opening up for questions. So please send me your questions and I will ask Leslie in the remaining time, whatever you'd like to discuss. In the meantime, we had discussed this question that I want to ask you, which for me, and maybe please educate me if this is the wrong question to ask after our conversation, but how do you balance talent and personality fit with diversity and inclusion? And I almost feel like I can answer myself that, it's all part of the leadership process. You need to balance it, because if you widen your net and then remove roadblocks, then you will get the people that will match what you're looking for. But would you like to add something?
Yes. Well, what does your ad say? You have to think about that too. Some people say, well, I can't find the right people, but what does it say? How do you have it written? And then when you bring someone in, what does your company look like once they get in there for the interview process? Is there no one that looks like them? Do you never say the word diversity and inclusion, and that's what you're trying to expand and grow on? And that's how you get stuck. So if you are going to, yes, expand, do all those things, throw your net out, once you get the catch to finally get through your door, you have to actually say, this is what we're trying to accomplish. Be upfront with it, because otherwise it just doesn't mean anything. So if we take nothing else away from this, it keeps coming back to communication and being open enough to expand beyond your current culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is has been, for me personally, very illuminating, because I'm joining a new company. And my mission, for the startup session has always been supporting diverse founders and women founders. And I've created some resources for them. But even when I'm looking as part of a new company of which companies to fund, female-led company or diverse founders don't come to me. And it sounds like that what I need to do to get access to them is to set up the right partnerships and plug into the right networks to get access, because they're not just going to magically come to me. Even if I want to support them, what's going to come to me is whatever my existing network is, which could be skewed one way just from the way it's being created organically.
They may not come to you because they may not know about you.
Right.
See, the mistake that's also made is, I'm great. When I ask someone, well, why does someone want to come work for you? Well, we're great. We're wonderful. Okay, well, I'm glad you have a high esteem of yourself, but what's your added value to the person coming in? What are you offering them? Is it continued education, salary? And if you're new, let's be honest, salary is going to be what it is, right? So what are you offering them to do? One of the best companies that I love, that I know is huge, is 3M. Why do I love them? Because you do what you do. If you're a scientist or you're making Post-its, but you're allowed to gather who you want in the company and work on side projects that are creative for you. So if you, as long as you do your job, if you decide you want to make a rocket ship out of Post-its, you get to pull the best team together and figure out how you're going to make those rocket ships out of Post-its. And if it works and it makes sense, they support you to do that. So even as a small company, is it, what is it that you're going to be able to support your employees with of interest? Is it your social justice outreach? Is it how you fund? Is it your partners? Be able to show that you're in this to grow this.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And so I guess my last question to you is, what some of the parting thoughts you can give to startup founders? I have a comment here. Okay, let's actually address this comment and then we'll do the parting thought question. That will be the last question. There's a question from Jennifer. I'm just going to read out what she said. She thinks a lot of companies fail to execute, take a stance because they're afraid to be, it's actually really good, to make a mistake, afraid to say the wrong thing. How do you encourage companies to feel comfortable enough to stand up?
So I think there are several ways. Number one, I've been getting this question a lot. And so I get beat up a lot sometimes with it, because I'm like, if you don't know, then ask. And don't ask your employees always within, because it's not their responsibility to do that. Because I know when some employees was like, I want no parts of your statement because I know it's not going to be true. And I don't want to have to answer why this thing was wrong. That's why you also have consultants. Now you keep saying, well, there's not money, there's not this. How about you come together as a small collective of small businesses and say, you have 500, you have 500, you have 200, you have 300. Let's come together and pool our money and ask someone to write a statement for us. Now, every statement has to be according to your company. You are going to make mistakes. Even when I'm hired, I say to them, this is not foolproof. We're dealing with human beings. Everyone's not going to like what you say and what you're going to do. But what I try to do is to be sensitive to who we're having the conversation to, that the statement was not about you and about the purpose and goal that Black Lives Matter. Just that simple. Not what you were going to get out of this, but that was the statement. And so, yes, sometimes you have to stumble, but it was more than a statement. See, because again, there was a company that did a lovely statement, but when I went onto their website to look at their statement, guess what happened? And the Mr. Reading Black Lives Matter, a pop-up of a little white baby came up. So I was like, huh. And they said they hired a consultant. So I'm like, so no one thought, you're putting it on the website, what does the website look like? Maybe that should be the pop-up. I'm not saying run and change pictures. And that's what I said to a company. I don't expect you to change all your pictures on your website so there's a black hand holding your product. But you need to know that that's a process you're going to need to look at. So sometimes stepping back and not saying anything is best. I talk about the best company outside of Ben & Jerry's. Here's a company that didn't need to say a word, but stayed according to their branding. It's babyname.com. I don't know if you've seen that going around. Baby name, and so it's a website that you get to go on and you can look at different baby names. I didn't know it before I saw their post. I'm not having children. I don't know anyone that does, but I am now their new publicist. Anybody having a kid, I need you to go on babyname.com and look at it, because they stay true to their brand. They put out the 30 names of people that have been killed, and it's over 30 that happened. We have now surpassed hashtags in Instagram for the amount of Blacks that have been killed at the hand of police. And they hashtagged all of those names, and they said, this was somebody's baby.
Wow.
Done. They didn't need to say we stand with anybody, we're kneeling, we're marching. They did what they did. These were the names of somebody's baby. I will speak about them forever. So yes, you're going to make a misstep. There's a lot of people that made missteps, but they made missteps because they were running to compete against their competition and not to speak to the mission itself.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a great point to end, because, you know, we have to stay true to the mission. We have to alter the mission if the mission isn't inclusive. And then I think it all has to come from the top down, because, you know, it's not the responsibility of any employee to educate the leadership on how they should be treated or bring new employees.
Well, you can ask for guidance, just not right now. Black folks are hurting right now. They are not in a good place. It is not our place to teach you at this particular moment when you've had 400 something years to catch up on it. But
right. Exactly.
There is a way to create that community of advocates, and it doesn't make a difference, champions of color that want to move the needle forward, not only for injustice, but for the betterment of the company. Bring those voices in.
Yeah. And I mean, I think in this workshop, we're all discovered a lot of tools that all of us can do already, and it's pretty simple. And I think for more guidance, please tell us how we can find you. What is your website? And how can we get in touch with you? And maybe type your email to everybody to us.
See, this technology, not my thing. But while I type and speak, you can, because now it's on private. Lord have mercy. I'm going to type it to you and you share it with everyone.
But you can tell me, is that Leslie at the Cavu Group?
Yes.
Okay.
.com. The company name is the Cavu Group, THECAVU Group. On all social media, it's the Cavu Group. I'm happy to have conversation, do trainings, speak like this. My joy at this moment and my pain at this moment is having these conversations. But if we can figure out how we all take a small step to make the changes that we need to continue to grow together, because we will not do this without each other. There will be no small business that will not survive without each other understanding that we need to move together. Then I get to sign off at the end of my life with a job well done.
Yeah, I think it's a remarkable mission to be on, and I'm certainly there. You know, I'm making a commitment on behalf of the company, all the companies I'm going to be involved in, to support you in any way that I can. And just the last thing I'd like to mention, Paula asked me to say that his company and the Cavu Foundation do free diversity and inclusion webinars for startups. I'm going to post Leslie's email and the link to those webinars for future education for everybody who's interested in getting more information.
And I should just throw out, I also have a podcast, Visibility Unlimited, that speaks on diversity.
Yeah, maybe you should post a link for that as well.
Definitely.
And so this is to learn more. And I think in this conversation, and this is one of many conversations, I think for all of us, it could be the beginning of a journey of self-awareness and understanding some things that we may have heard of, but, you know, couldn't really relate to because we weren't touched by it. And I think now all of us were like, wow, I mean, this is wrong. This is happening. What we all feel like we have to do something about it. And it's great to know that the things we can do are so simple and so actionable, and feeling like we can make a difference, you know, even in whatever environment we're in personally, even if we're not running big companies, if we're running small companies, even if we're, you know, consultants working with just a few people, we can change the way that we can do business. And I think that it's
say hello and goodbye.
You have empowered us all. I feel empowered. And you know, I always wanted to empower startup founders to learn finance, and you have empowered me to act in a diversity or inclusion.
Good.
And so I think in combination, it's wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining. I will make this, I'm still going to stop the recording. I will send you guys